Good morning, everyone. Diego, thank you. And that is an error. It's next month, but thank you so much. I'm having that corrected right now. But thank you. Hope you guys are all having an absolutely phenomenal day. We have a lot to cover this morning. So for those that were on last week, we did things a little bit differently. We went through our normal market update. And then we went ahead and we reviewed some items specifically around the national market update. Now, if you didn't get a chance to hear the national update, I left the slides here today. We're really only going to revisit 2 of the slides from the section today. So we're not going to go through the whole thing. And yet you're more than welcome to review those slides when you download if you are watching the recording. With that being said, if you really want to go into the full national update, we did that last week. You can review that in last week's video. Today, we're going to go over a couple different things. We're going to go over our market update as normal, LA, Orange, Riverside, and San Bernardino counties. And we are going to visit a couple things that have been in the news recently. And then we're going to be talking about some of the legislative updates and their impact here specifically for California. So just to kind of give you an update, there's a couple other things we'll cover. Some of those will go a little bit less in depth than we went last week. Just wanted to give you a synopsis of what we are going over today. With that, as always, we start with our TCPA, disclosure, disclaimer. Just a reminder, anything that we do talk about on this call or for any of our classes, please make sure that you are doing any of your lead generation in a TCPA compliant way. All right, let's go ahead and get started. First, we want to start off with Los Angeles County. Now, the data we're going to be looking at today as we go through each of these is going to be taking a look at month over month where we are month to date. So the 1st through the 22nd of December in comparison to the 1st through the 22nd of January, as well as January 1st through 22nd of 2022 compared to where we are month to date in 2023. A couple of things to note with this is that we are going to have a couple different impacts in play here. One is the results of seasonality. Seasonality tends to dictate that as a market, our local market tends to see its highest producing months in the 2nd and 3rd quarter of the year, with the dips being in Q1 and Q4, right? When we tend to see kind of that slowdown in the market. And yet, with that being said, we do start to see usually slowly that little bit of an increase. The second thing that is impacting where we are right now is the skew to seasonality that happened as a result of the national pandemic. So obviously the numbers over the last few years have been skewed outside of normal seasonality. So we see that kind of compounded into this year. And then the third major factor, which is going to be our interest rates, right? We've seen interest rates kind of continue to go up. We saw a drop recently. And so we saw that kind of pick up in an increase in mortgage applications as a result of the recent kind of drop in those rates. And yet all of those things kind of compound to give us what we see now in terms of the numbers. With that being said, as we get started, number of properties for sale in Los Angeles County, we're experiencing a dip month to date of 5.3%, right? This is up 68% from where we were a year ago, right? There's a lot more properties for sale and that are kind of staying on the market right now as related to where we were a year ago, when obviously we were having major inventory issues. When we look at the property sold, that number is down month over month, 39.6%. So we're seeing kind of that continued drop down in property sold. And then property sold year over year, a drop of about 52.5%. Looking at our inventory trends. Now, while we had seen that dip in new listings, right, we usually start to see that increase here in January. And so month to date from where we were right down here, we are seeing an increase month to date, month over month, of about 25% in listings taken. So there is some opportunity here in taking listings. A lot of people kind of set their New Year's resolutions around, hey, I want to get started selling my home next year. Well, it's next year, right? So the opportunity is there, as well as a lot of those expireds that are kind of restarting right now or relisting their properties, because a lot of people set that expired deadline at the end of December, right? And so there's an opportunity here to essentially take more listings. In terms of properties pended month to date, that is down 24.8%. So pendants are still down. Now, considering that we just saw a lot of new mortgage applications come in the market, a little bit of a softening on that interest rate, we may see this shift a little bit, but we'll kind of continue to monitor that. With that being said, where we were from year over year, new listings down 32%, pendants down 44.9%. We look at our average active price, average sold price. There's a couple numbers here I always like to look at. Average active price, where it is month to date, is always important. But we're looking at our average sold price. I personally like reviewing the year over year number a little bit more. With that being said, all of these three currently are in the green. So our average active price month to date, up 4.7%, right? We're seeing a little bit of growth there. Average sold price up 2.4%. And that average sold price year over year up 1.2%. We had started to see that decline, right? We had started to see that decline in the average active price. Average sold price, that decline was a little bit less severe. We could see a little bit of that decline right over here as we ended December. And yet we're starting to see that number trickle back up a little bit. There's a couple of reasons around this. One, if you look at some of the numbers around our inventory trends, right, and the number of properties for sale, as well as the number of new listings, we've seen a little bit of growth in the number of new listings month over month, but we had started to see declines before that, right? So that meant there was less listings coming on the market. There was also less properties listed for sale, right? And so when we have this kind of inventory issue that comes into play, we know that supply and demand dictates price. So when supply is high and demand is low, the prices tend to experience a decrease. When supply is low and demand is high, well, that dictates a price increase. And so right now we've seen that we are still technically not, so when we get into the inventory numbers, you'll see this, but we had seen inventory go up all the way up to November. In December, we saw a drop in our inventory numbers, right? And how much inventory was actually on the market. Part of that being is you see a lot of inventory that maybe was on the market expire in the month of December, right? And so all of a sudden there's less inventory on the market. But demand was a little bit lower because with the interest rates being higher, we started to see that demand decrease. Mortgage applications went down, right? Now we're seeing mortgage applications have gone up with the softening of the rate. And we're seeing that there's still kind of new inventory coming on the market, but it's still a little bit lower, right? While we see that inventory number creeping up, it's still not quite there. And so this then kind of comes over to our price. This also is going to be impacted by our micro markets, right? There's going to be some areas that are lower inventory areas that get a couple listings on the market. And so that micro market may still be a little bit of a more desirable area, right? It's going to get more traffic, more exposure. And so we can see that kind of reflected in what we're seeing with price. We'll continue to watch these numbers, but we're seeing a little bit of that increase here as well. Looking at our absorption rate. So this is what I mean by when we look at our inventory trends, that in the month of November, we saw an increase and we ended the month of November with a decrease. Now, with new listings coming on the market, pendants be down, and number of properties for sale are kind of staying up, we are still seeing an increase in those inventory numbers up to about 3.8% month to date. We won't know where this really ends up until we get to the end of the month. We look at our average days on market, up to about 42 days on market. Now, I know that sounds like a lot, right? Especially when we look at, hey, we were at 29 days on market last year. That's a pretty big increase, a little bit less than about 5% less than 50% here. And yet what happens? It's not that big in terms of days on market, right? what we look at here is this is very akin to what we saw in 2018 and 2019 as it related to the days on market. The other thing I want to note is there are two things that we do know when properties stay on the market longer. Now, they stay on the market a very long time. When we start seeing properties that are 100 days on the market, that are 90 days on the market, that are 120 days on the market, right? What do we start thinking? Hey, maybe we can lowball them, right? Hey, maybe we can get our clients a good deal on it. So the longer, especially past the average days on market, the longer a property stays on the market, the more that has a direct impact on price, right? On one hand. The second thing that's going to be really important on this is if you have a listing, right? If you have a listing, the only net positive that we see of a property staying on the market longer is that you have a greater opportunity to capture more leads. Now, not all of you attended my open house playbook class that we taught on Friday. This is something that we went into in depth, right? And we will be teaching that class again. We actually distributed playbooks that are essentially a handbook of how to use an open house, how to hold an open house, right? But beyond that, on how to use an open house as a lead generation opportunity, right? Open houses are not meant to be passive. Open house, and what I mean by that is this, is we're not supposed to just put a sign in the yard and see how many people come to our property and passively wait for those leads to come in, right? There are activities that we can do around our open house that are geared to help us increase our lead generation opportunity. When we see our average days on market go up, that is an opportunity to capture more leads when we use it correctly, right? That's why we talked about some of the online lead gen opportunities, the phone call opportunities, right? The door knocking opportunities that exist around that specific open house. So just note that, right? Days on market go up. Doesn't mean it's the end of the world. It means there's a greater opportunity for you to capture more leads. Now, sold versus original list price, we are experiencing a decline here, and yet that average active price is up, right? So that spread is a little bit less. When we see the average active price go down and sold versus original list price go down, that spread is a little bit more, right? Because those two numbers kind of get added together. In this one, we see that decline in the sold versus original list price, but the list price goes up, right? So that gap is just a little bit smaller here. But yes, sold versus original list price down at 5.2%. Property selling at about 92% of lists averaged out over Los Angeles County. All right, digging into our Orange County numbers. Number of properties for sale down 2.7% month over month to date. Properties sold down 40.2% month over month to date. We look at the number of properties for sale from this same time a year ago. There's a lot more inventory on the market than there was in this time frame a year ago here, right? And then properties sold down 52%. There's less property selling right now in Orange County. We look at the new listings. So similar to what we're seeing in LA County, the number of new listings coming on the market is experiencing a little bit of an increase here. Now, I'm going to note, considering what we saw in December of last year to January of last year, I want you to see this growth here at 8.8%. The growth is a little bit slower right now in terms of the new listings that are coming on the market in Orange County right now. What tends to happen as we kind of experience this market change, and we talked about some of the objections that we may experience last year, right? Is that we know that when somebody is buying a property, about 55% of the time on average, right? About 55% of the time, that buyer has a home to sell. When interest rates go up, right? When interest rates go up, that has a direct correlation on the number of mortgage applicants that we see in a given market. So those applicants go down. A portion of those applicants are also selling a home, right? If they are to buy. So if they don't buy, they don't sell. Right. And so we lose that kind of group on the market as well. That's why one of the biggest objections that we deal with sellers in a market like this one is, why would I trade my lower interest rate for a higher interest rate? Right. Our job is to speak around that, right? Is to talk through that, is to solve that particular objection. Right. And part of that is going to be through the data. So when I go through the national sites, I'm not going to go through everything, but I will revisit two of what I would consider the most important slides. One of those being the life, the interest rate over the life, as well as over the last few decades, as well as home prices over the last few decades. I think those are probably two of the most important slides in the national update, because that directly relates to when we see less new listings coming on the market. It's because we have to get really deep now with those that are interested in selling into their motivation, right? It's no longer about, hey, I think I can get a low interest rate when I buy. It's about, why are they actually potentially selling, right? Is it because they have a new job and they need a shorter commute, right? Is it because they're growing their family and so they need a bigger house, right? We have to get to that motivation on the basis of life cycle, not just this kind of economic cycle. So that kind of gives us a view of where we are right now. Properties pending also down about 21.5%. And when we look at a year ago, down a little more than the 40s over here. We look at our average active price. So another area where, look at this average active price up 0.6, average sold price up 13.7%, average sold price year over year up 2.6%. Orange County does tend to have some of the higher price point properties. So there's always the chance that an anomaly property is what is jumping this up. So we'll monitor that till end of month here. We look at our absorption rate. So like I had mentioned, we saw that dip in December. This happened in all 4 counties. And yet we're seeing that increase here. 2.9 months of inventory, about 3 months of inventory, does not move us out of the market that we're in, right? It does not move us out of the market we're in. That is still considered lower inventory. Obviously not as low as 0.4 months of inventory, right? That we saw in December of 21 over here. It is significantly more inventory, but it's still considerably low amount of inventory available here. We look at our days on market, an increase here of 22.2% up to 44 days on market. It's a little bit more than double what we saw last year. And then our sold versus original list price, no change, right? In the sold versus original list price, 93%. And yet we saw that our active price and our sold price has gone up, right? So 93% of a higher initial price, right, is important to kind of look at here as this trend. Okay, Riverside County. We look at the number of properties for sale. This is kind of holding true across the board. We see a decline of 6.1% here, up 141 from the same time a year ago. We look at our properties sold, down 37.3% month over month, down 55.1 from a year ago. We look at our new listings. So in this case, I want you to see this in Riverside County. New listings are up 11.6%. Pendants are also up. This is the first county where we're seeing that pendant number increase here, up about 2.7% month to date. So we are starting to see those new listings come in. There's opportunity here, right? What I want you to see is, as new listings are coming on the market, is that there is opportunity for you to take listings. All right, looking at our pricing trends, another area where our average active price and our sold price is in the green. And yet when we look at that sold price from a year ago, now this isn't a major fluctuation downwards, and yet we are still lower than we were in January of last year when we look at that average sold price. This sold price month over month is a pretty significant increase right over here. And that average active price is up 2.5% here in Riverside County. This is a lower price point county, right? So one of the things we talked about this in the open house class as well, is that when we're choosing a good open house to do, right? When we're choosing a great open house, we always want new to market properties that are still within their first about 14 days, about 2 weeks, right? But we also want properties that are in that mid-tier range, right? So what I mean by that is our mid-priced homes or entry-level homes. We talked about making sure that we're below the jumbo line territory so that it still can appeal to the biggest number of potential buyers with that property. Now, Riverside County starts getting into our lower price point counties, right? And so we saw that the pendants have picked up in Riverside County. Your average active price has picked up. Your average sold price has picked up. likely because there's a little bit more competition as we are dealing with the effects of affordability issues as it relates to the interest rates, because this is a lower price point county, right? Which means that for those that can't afford the higher price points, this becomes a more accessible price point for them, which also means more competition, right? Which drives our average sold price over here. So something to just kind of be cognizant of as we go through these numbers as well. Okay, absorption rates, as I mentioned, we saw that decline in December from November, and yet month to date, we are seeing an increase in inventory. I talked about this last week. I'm going to mention it again now, is when we get to about 4.7 months, we're getting very close to 5 months of inventory. When we dip into 5 months of inventory, that does put us in a balanced market, right? What we consider a balanced market. So it's just something we want to continue to monitor because we tend not to stay in balanced markets for very long. Looking at our average days on market, here we're seeing an increase to about 52 days on market from 46 days. And then no change on that sold versus original list price at about 94% of that original list price. And yet our average active price is up, right? So 94% of a higher active. Okay, last but not least, San Bernardino County, number of properties for sale down 9.7%, right? The number of properties for sale declining here, number of properties sold down 39.7%. So this is month over month from December. And we can see that growth in properties for sale in comparison to where we were a year ago, as well as that decline in properties that have sold. We look at the new listings. So here's the thing, right? In all 3 counties prior to this, LA, Orange, Riverside, when it came to new listings, we saw an increase, right? More new listings coming on the market. We are not seeing that in San Bernardino County, a decline of 5.4%. So we're still experiencing that decline, which is not typical of January, right? This isn't typical of January. Now, here's the thing. We start getting into our lowest price point county here in San Bernardino. One of the things I said was the biggest objection that we get from our sellers right now is, why would I trade a low payment for a higher payment? Why would I trade a lower interest rate for a higher interest rate? If you are in the lowest price point county, right, which means your payment is probably lower, right, because the property values are lower in San Bernardino County than they are in the other 3 counties that we talked about, then that objection plays even more true. Why would I trade my low price point property for a higher price point? With the exception of this, when we start dealing with life cycles, right? Oh, somebody, gets married and now they want to upsize their home, right? They have a baby and now they want to upsize. They're an empty nester. Maybe now downsizing might not be the biggest thing here if the payment is less in San Bernardino County, right? So it's important to take that into consideration. We look at the trends and to kind of think through what the data is telling us. Data plus insights allows us to take action. So I'm giving you that data, but there's a reason why we probably see a decline in these new listings in the lowest price point counties, because people are not wanting to move from their very affordable home right now, right? Now, these are areas that tend to be higher risk areas. And so why might somebody move? Now, it might be more of my notice of defaults, might be a little bit more of a reason somebody might move in an area like this, right? This also gives us more of how do we target particular areas. If San Bernardino County is a farm for you, then what are the most likely reasons that somebody might actually list their home? Right? Properties pending down 17.5% month to date. And then we look at a year ago, new listings down 42%, pendings down 42.5%. We look at our average active price. So same thing, right? The last couple counties, we saw that average active price month over month and average sold price month over month was down. Was up. Here it's down, right? This average active price down 0.2%, average sold price down 0.4%. So not only do we have less inventory, less sales happening, and we're also seeing a decline in that average active price and average sold price here. Our absorption rate, so we went like we did in all 4 counties, a dip from November to December, and yet starting to experience that increase. This also is another area where we're very close to that balanced market territory. So we will continue to kind of monitor this as we get very close to that tipping point. We look at our average days on market, up to 52 days on market. And then that sold versus original list is 94%. And yet remember that there was a dip in that average active price. So this spread is probably a little bit less than, or more of an impact here, right? All right. That kind of goes over our 4 counties. Now we're going to jump into legislative updates and industry news. We are going to start with industry news. Wells Fargo, right? Wells Fargo. Some of you may have already talked or seen this. Wells Fargo is essentially kind of doing a little bit less, right? They're stepping back a little bit from the housing market. They're really now focusing more so on their existing customers. And they've talked about how they are also essentially really focusing on borrowers in minority communities. There's going to be more layoffs. We're going to see this over time in Wells Fargo as well. So just a little bit of kind of seeing what's happening, right? Wells Fargo is an institutional lender. They're a bank, right? They're a bank. This is one of those things that we watch what's happening because they've been one of the biggest mortgage lending banks that exist. And so in this case, they are significantly shrinking that side of their business, right? They're significantly, so you're talking about one of the biggest lending banks significantly taking a step back on the housing market, right? Now, when a financial institution lends on a property, what they're essentially doing is they're saying, hey, one, they're going to collect the interest on that property, but two, they're saying, hey, we believe this asset holds the value such that we're willing to lend on it, right? That's why banks do appraisals and things like that. This is a little different, right? They're doing 2 things here. Is now they're saying, hey, instead of, trying to reach as many people as possible, we're going to focus on our own personal customers, right? And we are going to now focus on this minority community. Well, we've seen some of what the census data has told us. Census data also tells us that over the course of the next decade, we're going to see a big increase in purchases that are coming from the minority community, right? That's been one of the predictions. They say about 70% of the purchases over the next decade are going to come from the Hispanic community as well. But overall, that most purchases over the next decade are specifically going to come from minority communities. Why? Because that age group that is coming into first-time home purchases right now is considered to be one of the most demographically mixed communities or groups that we've seen in a long time. And so this, when we talk about housing, that is essentially the biggest category of debt in America that's held by Americans, right? You've got your mortgages, you've got credit card debt, all of these different pieces of personal loans, right? All of these different types of debt. This is Wells Fargo taking a step to say, hey, we need to look at our long-term profitability and what is going to be the best move that we can make. And so they're a big player. That's why I think it's important to kind of just have an understanding of this happening right now and knowing that this is going on. So I wanted to touch on that as well. The second is the University of California's new deal with Blackstone, right? So for those that don't remember, I have talked about Blackstone before. I don't talk about it often, but I've talked about Blackstone before. Blackstone is essentially a very massive private equity fund, right? So they're a real estate fund, right? They were really big during the last market, right? The big market crash in acquiring properties, right? And this is what we would consider kind of I would say like an institutional investor, right? They're a housing fund. Their goal is essentially to go and buy and acquire as many properties as possible, buying up homes, buying up apartments in California, but also in other states. What ended up happening is that as property values have gone down, there are certain people that were in this fund with Blackstone that started withdrawing their money. And so that would have made Blackstone a less kind of formidable player. And yet, what happens now is the University of California has become a major investor in Blackstone. They essentially put $4 billion into Blackstone. There's a lot of people that are very upset about this and so that's why you see the strike photo here on this article. This was from the LA Times. Part of the reason being is that you now have a major housing fund that has $4 billion to put into buying up properties. Now, the University of California, the reason, right, generally, if people are driven by money as the motivation here, is that they in what would they be getting out of this, right? Is okay, now they have a stake in some of these property acquisitions that could happen over the course of this kind of next real estate market that Blackstone can do. Is now they potentially have stake in this. The challenge being that the concern is that housing funds like Blackstone being able to buy up all of these properties takes away opportunity from regular homeowners to also buy properties. And so this can affect or drive a lot of the affordability issue that we see, is because we said supply and demand dictates price. Well, if you've got a housing fund that can now acquire a percentage of that supply like they did following 2008, right? Blackstone essentially bought a large number of single family homes that the bank had foreclosed on, and they started turning them into rentals. And there was a lot of other groups that did that as well, but Blackstone was one of the major players. And so if you have a real estate fund like Blackstone coming in and buying a significant amount of properties in California, now that they are funded by the University of California to the tune of $4 billion, that's a lot of money that can get infused into acquiring properties that would otherwise be able to go to regular people. That decreases the supply that is available on the market, thus impacting supply and demand and driving up price, right? Because now you have to compete against a real estate fund. That's one of the reasons why there's a lot of people on strike around this. We'll see what ends up happening with this, if they stay invested, or they've actually been sent letters that are encouraging them to separate or divest their interest from Blackstone. So separate and pull out that $4 billion. So we'll see how this plays out. And yet another piece that's important to kind of watch how this has the potential to impact us. All right. Some legislative updates. So I did want to go over these now. I'm going to go over 2 pages. These are the 3, technically 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 bills, Assembly bills, Senate bills that are going to be kind of the bigger issues. And then I'm going to go through some kind of like a hot sheet of a couple other ones. AB 2097. Basically what AB 2097 is doing is there used to be minimum parking requirements on development projects, right? There still are. Some cities, right, or some and what we mean by public agency is essentially going to be the city, right? So this is Assembly Bill 2097. Assembly Bill 2097, originally, you could say, hey, we as the city of Downey, as an example, is going to say that you have to have, when you construct a new development, you have to have a certain amount of parking, right? That is available in this new development that you're creating. What AB 2097 did is it prohibited public agencies from saying that there had to be a minimum parking requirement so long as that development is within a 1/2 mile of a major transit stop, right? So if it's nearby a major transit, then they're saying, hey, you know what? This is considered kind of commuter area. And so because you don't necessarily need that parking, because we're assuming that more people are coming as commuters, we're going to take out that minimum parking requirement in this particular area. So this is one for those that are kind of developing that comes into play. This is going to impact both. This also includes commercial projects. The next one, AB 211 and so Assembly Bill 2011 and Senate Bill 6. This is essentially the Affordable Housing and High Roads Job Act. Basically what this did is it streamlined the development process for our multifamily housing. So everything from zoning, essentially when you go city by city, you're having to deal with zoning designation permits, right? What everything is used for. And so what this did is they said, and the reason that there's two bills here is because when they were dealing with the unions around this, because this was one that had a heavy kind of union influence, specifically because of the wages to construction workers, right, is they said, hey, we can't come into an agreement on whether we're going to go with AB 211 or whether we're going to go to SB 6. And so they essentially kind of brought them together and they worked together, right? And so what they said is we're going to streamline the process of getting permits and getting zoning and getting all of these things, but the development has to pay prevailing wages and satisfy affordable housing standards. So we're going to make it easier to develop these multifamily developments so long as you are paying a great wage to the construction workers, or what they would consider an appropriate wage to the construction workers, and you're satisfying certain affordable housing standards. Now, SB 6 doesn't apply affordable housing qualification, but it does require prevailing wages and utilizing a skilled and trained workforce. Essentially, this is really going into partnering with union labor, right? These two laws take effect July 1st. Now, next, SB, Senate Bill 561, AB Assembly Bill 2233, and Assembly Bill 2592. These are really geared towards requiring surplus state land to be used for affordable housing development. So essentially what Newsom was trying to do here is, obviously we have a supply issue in California. What they said was, well, we have this extra land. What if we required that to be used to be able to create more affordable housing, since that's an area that we have not enough housing in, right? Not enough supply. And so there's going to be certain timelines so that they can kind of build out these list of development opportunities. Similar to that, AB 2592 is going to require identification of state-owned buildings for conversion to housing. So there's some new opportunities here for potential housing projects as a result of these three bills. Okay, the next ones are going to be a little bit quicker. Assembly Bill 2234. This is basically creating new timelines for issuance of approvals around housing permits, building demolition, and grading permits. Assembly Bill 2295. This is going to give special exemptions from certain zoning as we look at rental housing developments on land that's owned by educational agencies, right? And I'm sorry, I didn't separate out Senate Bill 886. Again, applying to university housing projects. So what happens, this is going to be like our student housing. There's going to be new exemptions from the certain qualifications that come into play around some of these properties as well. When we look at AB, Assembly Bill 2334, Assembly Bill 1551, and Assembly Bill 682, this is going to be new density standards, right? How dense a particular property is going to be. Now we've got, so I'm going to know, I highly recommend, these are ones that you may just want to be aware of, screenshot. You probably don't need these right now, but it's just important to kind of be aware of what else, what bills are kind of out right now. Okay. Sorry, I'm just muting somebody really quick. There we go. All right. And then we've got Assembly Bill 2021, SB 897, and AB 916. This is going to be geared for ADUs, right? So obviously we know statewide there is a mandate which allows everyone to have ADUs, and yet each city then has its own kind of ordinances and things that it's put into place around these ADUs. What these bills did is they were geared to ease the development of ADUs, to kind of increase some of the height limit so that you could actually create some nicer or bigger accessory dwelling units, as well as increase some of the bedroom counts, and doing this at a statewide level, meaning that each city no longer had the right to kind of enforce more limitations on this. This is a really, I would say this is a pretty important one to kind of keep an eye on, especially as popular as accessory dwelling units and adding those on properties are right now. This is some really good bills that if you have a client that has been curious about adding an accessory dwelling unit onto their property, this might be one to be able to do a care call for that client, right? And share these bills with them. Assembly Bill 2245, this is just going to be some additional procedures for this is originally only applicable to inherited property, right? But they've expanded for partition action. So another one to just kind of look at if this is something that is relevant for your clients. Assembly Bill 2745. This is more just for our industry in general, but this is new limitations that were enacted for broker applicants. So if you've been applying to get your broker's license, which remember the increased liability that comes with that, there is a 2-year experience requirement saying that you've had 2 years of experience in the industry before you're able to apply to get your broker's license. That must now be satisfied within the 5-year prior to the application date. So if all of a sudden you're like, well, I had 2 years of experience, but that was 10 years ago, that doesn't count anymore, right? So that's been a bigger limitation that has been added on here as well. All right. I know that was a lot, right? Those slides are available for you. I'll make the correction on that separation of, I believe it's SB 6, but that's a lot of information there that is available for you. I'm not going to go over the full national update. What I am going to go over here is a reminder here on home prices and on interest rates. So I'm going to move really quickly here. When we look at home prices, the reason that these 2 slides are going to be the most important 2 slides that you have available to you is when we look at home prices, we know, right? We know that the long-term average rate of appreciation is 4%. In our last decade, right before the last decade, we saw that 4% go up high, which means in order to return to average, we had to experience price decline. In order to return to average again, we had to experience price appreciation to bring us back to that 4% line. Right now, we are up about 12.5%. We are too high. We are off of the trend line, right? And these slides will be updated at Family Reunion, right? But right now, which is next month, reminder. But right now, we are much too high off the trend line, which begs the question, will we have price drops? Well, yes, right, nationally, we have to get back to this 4% line, right? Now, when that's going to happen, how long that's going to take, that's a little bit different, right? Does it mean it's going to be one significant price drop like we had over here? Well, the circumstances are a little bit different, right? So this is just a reminder that long-term appreciation is going to be what's really important for us, is that we have that long-term appreciation of 4% over time. So if you have a client that is saying, oh, no, I want to wait, right? I want to wait until the home prices are lower, right? Or the interest rate is lower, all of these different things. What we also know to be true is that our interest rate and home prices tend to go in an opposite trajectory, right? We see home prices go up, interest rates go down, generally, right? Now, interest rates go up, home prices go down, right? We're paying for one thing or the other. Whether more of our payment is going towards our interest rate or towards the home is going to be dependent on the time of purchase. Now, in this particular case, for example, even if you have clients that bought property and those property values go down, we know that time tells us and the trend tells us that at some point, we will return to a long-term average appreciation of 4%. Maybe not in the next year or two, right? But so long as they keep the asset long enough, they should be able to capture that 4% of appreciation over time when the prices start going up again. So it's really the only thing we could time here, right? We don't know when the properties are going to go down or up. We can look at that in relation to interest rates and have a sort of prediction, but we don't know how much they're going to drop or how much they're going to increase. Nobody has a crystal ball. The only thing we do know is this long-term average, right? So something important to talk to your clients about here so that they know that if all of a sudden you start getting clients that are having quote unquote this buyer's remorse because they're like, oh, the property values are going down, I bought this property. Well, if they keep that asset long enough, they should return to trend, right? The trend line here. When we look at, now we're going to skip through these are available from last week. We went through this a lot, but the other side, I said these are the two money sides, right? Is the mortgage rates annual. Now, when you have a client, this is, well, I'm going to wait until the interest rate goes down. Well, down to what, right? I've had clients that say, oh, I want to wait till the interest rate is back down to 2%, right? Likely will not happen again in my career lifetime, right? If not longer. So important to kind of note here is that where we are with interest rates is about on trend on what that average has been since about 1990, right? 5.97. 7.81 is about on trend since 1972, right? Highest interest rate we've seen being right over here in the 80s, 16.63%. 16%, right? I'm going to note my grandmother bought in 71. That's not on this chart. And she bought at a double-digit interest rate. Was it a good purchase? Well, if we look at the home prices, yes, because she's experienced, even with the declines, right? She's experienced that 4% rate of appreciation over all that time since 1971. So it's important to kind of be able to show this as well, because sometimes we need to combat the mindset that our clients have a little bit, right? Their mindset, they if they can afford it, they feel comfortable with the payment. Now, that's if they're able to, right? If they're comfortable with the payments, because there's affordability as an issue, which, yes, in some cases, people are literally not qualified to buy, or they cannot purchase, or they cannot afford to make the payment, right? That's a separate issue. I'm talking about those that can, but are nervous, right? Those that can, but are saying, oh, I want to wait, right? Those that can, but their objection is a little bit more mindset related, because we need to educate them on this history, right, around the mortgage rates. That's why this slide is so important to be utilizing in some of your buyer consultation meetings right here, right? Is to really show what that historical average actually looks like. So again, we're not going to go through these pieces, but I want to remind you of the three major objections that you should really be geared to discuss. Why would I trade a low interest rate for a high interest rate? Right? Well, we go through some of those prices. We go through those equity gains, right? Is somebody buying and selling, right? They're going to buy another property and sell their property. Are they buying and selling just because they want to take advantage of the economy? Then it might not be the best time, right? But if they're buying and selling because they want to start a family, because they just got married, because of all these different reasons that people actually transact business, then why is the interest rate going to stop them from the next part of their life, right? Which is a conversation we need to be having with the sellers that are able, ready and willing. Now with the buyers, should I wait to buy because what I could buy today would be worth less tomorrow? That's where that home price sheet is important to go over, right? Is, well, hey, even if property values go down tomorrow, so long, if you're not looking at selling it tomorrow, then why is that an issue? We know the average rate of appreciation over time is 4%. And if you hold that asset long enough, not only are you going to gain that appreciation, but you're building equity, right? What if you keep renting? Where is that money going, right? That's a conversation we should have. That's why that chart is so important. Interest rates are too high. That's why the interest rate chart is so important. Well, let's actually look at that. Are interest rates really that high in the scheme of things when we look at interest rates over the last 2 decades, right? That's why that slide is going to be so important here. That's why I wanted to revisit those slides, because if you are not getting these objections, you are not sitting down with enough people. These are the 3 main objections that we are experiencing right now on the basis of the market that we're in. So you have to be able to speak to them, and you have to be able to do it in an evidence-backed way. Those 2 slides are the 2 that I would be including in every presentation right now, to really work through these 3 objections. All right. The second thing is the Mortgage Hacks Playbook. Now, if you joined us for the Mortgage Hacks class, you should have received a full Mortgage Hacks Playbook. I think I have one right here. This is not it. This is one of my other playbooks. A full Mortgage Hacks Playbook, right, that goes through quite a few different opportunities. So if we know that these are the 3 major objections that exist, that's why the Mortgage Hacks Playbook existed, right? Is so that we could really dig through when it comes to dealing with affordability, what are some of the opportunities that we have? This class will be back on the calendar, right? We are going to be doing this class again. If you attended already, I encourage you to still come to this class, and I'm going to tell you why. Because repetition is how you really learn it, right? We hear it once, and it's a lot of information that we went through. We gave you guys a full playbook of all the different, not all of, but a lot of the different mortgage hacks that exist and how you could have conversations with your clients around these. Now, if you came to that class and you haven't taken action by calling some of your clients to discuss some of these opportunities with them, you're missing a huge opportunity. Data plus insights equals action, right? We gave you the data plus the insights on how to use this. If you didn't take the section of the Mortgage Hacks Playbook, right? Because one section of it is all about how you can increase affordability for your clients. The second section was all about how you can add value to your past clients. If you didn't take that section and share that with your past clients and say, hey, I know I sold you this house last year. I wanted to give you a couple of tips and tricks about how you could pay less interest over the life of the loan, how I could save you money. Can we talk about that? And ask for a referral after that conversation. You are missing an opportunity, right? You are missing an opportunity. This playbook is a handbook for you to use in your business. So if you haven't gotten this playbook, keep an eye out. We're going to do this class again. If you've already done the Mortgage Hacks Playbook, great. Come to the class again, right, as well. But this is going to be a really great opportunity. Again, the 201 Club, I've talked about this before. I'm going to talk about this again, right? We've got 3 main places that the top producers in the nation are getting their business. 38% of the top producers' first line of where they get about 38% of their business is sphere of influence, referrals, and past clients. 20% from open houses, 14% here from online leads. That's why we did the open house playbook last week. We're going to be teaching the sphere of influence playbook as well as the online lead playbook. So keep an eye out for those. And remember, Command is an amazing tool that's available for you. It is not the only tool, and I'm never going to say that it is, right? If you are using something else, great. Just make sure you're using it to your full potential. And if you're not using anything, Command is right there for you. That's how we have agents. This has been studied, right? This has been studied of that breakpoint is making sure you have at least 201 people in your database on Smart Plans. Come to the Friday classes to really learn about how to use this at a high level. Last but not least, I just want to touch base on 72 Sold, and then I want to remind you about a class that we're doing tomorrow in-house. 72 Sold, I am going to note over 16,500 referrals have been given out this month alone, right, through 72 Sold. This is a great listing opportunity. It's available to you. It's not a requirement. It's just another tool that is available for you. If you want to take advantage of that, come see us, right? Come see the leadership team so we can talk to you about what 72 Sold can do. Oh, I forgot about this slide, my friends. Also, you guys know I love talking about one sheets. I love talking about playbooks. I love talking about systems. We put together a special newsletter. So there's the Under the Hood newsletter that goes out regularly. There's a special segment that has 25 top producers with their business models that we are going to give to you, right? That we're going to give to you. I'm going to be sending out a link on how you can sign up for this, right? So that you can get access to this. I don't want to inundate everybody and just start sending this all around, right? I want to make sure that you have time to implement and look through these models. Every single one is going to include a one-page sheet of the model from that top producer, as well as a video from that top producer talking you through what they're doing in their business. So you're going to see this going out. I'll send out a sign up, but we were going to give you those models for your business, right? And go under the hood of some of these top real estate professionals at KW. With that, the last thing I want to go ahead and share with you all, my friends, is that tomorrow at 1 p.m. here at the office, we are going to be doing a live class on all of the new forms with Ed Bonilla. Okay, we've already done the new form class twice, but I know there is a lot of questions about these forms that are going on. So I know we did it last Thursday. We did it the first week of the year on all the new 6 new BRE forms that have come out through CAR. Tomorrow, that class will be in person with handouts so that you can get all of your questions answered about how to use these new forms in your business. With that, I hope you all have an absolutely phenomenal day, my friends. Have a good one, everyone.
Thank you, Monica.
Of course. Bye, everyone.
Thank you.